King Von, When the Streets Became the Stage, a documented chronicle. The rain fell steady on that November morning in 2020, streaking down the windows of Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. Inside, doctors worked frantically to save a 26-year-old man who had been rushed through their doors with multiple gunshot wounds. His name was Dayvon Bennett, though the world knew him better as King Von, one of Chicago drill music's brightest rising stars. Despite their best efforts at 4:48 in the morning, Von was pronounced dead. The music industry mourned the loss of a talented storyteller. His fans grieved for an artist who seemed on the verge of superstardom. But for many families in Chicago, Von's death marked something entirely different. For them, it closed a chapter on years of terror, violence, and loss at the hands of someone they believed was responsible for multiple murders and who had weaponized fame to continue violence. This is not a story about redemption or wasted potential. This is not a tale of a troubled youth who made mistakes and found his way. This is a documented account of violence, system failures, and an entertainment industry that some argue profited from real bloodshed. The evidence for what you're about to hear comes from police reports, FBI documents, court testimony, federal indictments, and Bennett's own words captured on social media and in his music. Before we continue, it's critical to establish what can be proven versus what remains alleged or speculative. Bennett was acquitted of one murder charge in 2017. He was never charged in most of the other deaths discussed in this video. Many connections between Bennett and unsolved murders come from circumstantial evidence, social media posts, song lyrics, and analysis by online researchers rather than criminal charges or convictions. Where someone is never charged or is acquitted, the legal presumption of innocence applies. However, federal prosecutors stated after his death that had he lived, they planned to charge him in connection with the murder of FBG Duck, and 6 men were convicted for carrying out that killing. What emerges is a portrait of a man who was charged in 2 murder cases, acquitted in one, and killed before facing charges in another, who turned his street experiences, whether lived or imagined, into chart-topping music, and who federal authorities believe ordered a killing that would destroy families and send 6 men to prison for life. Part 1. The Foundation of Violence: Understanding Chicago's South Side. To understand Dayvon Bennett's story, you first have to understand where he came from. Chicago's South Side has been shaped by decades of policies and practices that concentrated poverty, segregated communities, and created the conditions for cycles of violence that continue to this day. The Parkway Gardens apartment complex, located at 6400 block of South Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, wasn't always known as O Block. When it was built in the 1950s, Parkway Gardens represented hope. Designed by architect Henry K. Holzman, the complex featured 35 buildings, 11 8-story high-rises, and 24 row houses spanning 13 acres. The buildings had modern heating, appliances, and elevators, luxuries many African-American families couldn't access elsewhere in Chicago due to discriminatory housing practices. Parkway Gardens was significant for another reason. It became the first cooperatively owned black housing development in the United States. Middle-class African-American professionals managed the complex, and prominent figures like Mary McLeod Bethune spoke at its cornerstone-laying ceremony. Governor Adlai Stevenson II, Chicago Mayor Martin H. Kennelly, and both of Illinois's U.S. senators attended. The complex was meant to provide quality, affordable housing during an era when redlining and racial covenants severely limited where black families could live. Among its early residents was a young girl named Michelle Robinson, who would later become Michelle Obama, First Lady of the United States. But the dream didn't last. In 1972, Parkway Gardens Cooperative defaulted on a $13.8 million hard-insured loan. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development took control, and almost immediately, maintenance and investment declined. The buildings began to deteriorate. By the 1980s, the complex had fallen into such disrepair that when HUD foreclosed in 1986, the entire property, 35 buildings, was appraised at only $4.4 million. On March 11, 1987, it sold for $1 to the National Development Council. As the buildings decayed, gangs moved in. The 1970s and 80s saw Greater Grand Crossing, the community surrounding Parkway Gardens, become one of Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. The gangster disciples and black disciples fought for territory. The crack epidemic devastated families. Mass incarceration removed fathers and brothers from homes. Schools struggled. Jobs disappeared. The ladder to prosperity that Parkway Gardens was meant to provide had broken. Then, in 2006, something happened that would change Parkway Gardens forever. The Chicago Housing Authority demolished the Randolph Tower, known as the Calumet Building, at 6217 South Calumet Avenue. This 16-story red brick project had been the headquarters for the Black Disciples Gang. According to a 2004 Chicago Tribune article, drug dealers in the Randolph Tower were generating as much as $300,000 per day in drug profits. When the building came down, the Black Disciples needed a new base. They chose Parkway Gardens, which had traditionally been Gangster Disciples' territory. The result was catastrophic. Between June 2011 and June 2014, Parkway Gardens and the surrounding block experienced the highest number of shootings of any location in Chicago. The Chicago Sun-Times would later describe it as the most dangerous block in Chicago. In just 3 years, 19 people were shot and killed in and around the complex. Most were teenagers and young adults, some barely out of high school. The victims included innocent bystanders, gang members, and anyone unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The violence was personal and localized. These weren't organized crime families or drug cartels. These were kids from neighboring blocks, killing each other over perceived disrespect. Social media posts, lyrics in songs. The territorial lines were drawn street by street. Parkway Gardens, renamed O Block after the murder of Black Disciples member O.D. Perry in 2011, was controlled by the Black Disciples. Just blocks away, at 63rd Street and St. Lawrence and Eberhart Avenues, an area that would be renamed Tuckerville after the murder of 15-year-old gangster disciple Shondale Tucker Gregory, the rival faction held territory. These kids could see each other's homes from their front porches, and they were killing each other with an almost casual frequency that spoke to how normalized violence had become. Community members described hearing gunshots every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Mothers stopped letting their children play outside. Young men couldn't cross certain streets without risking their lives. And into this environment, on August 9, 1994, Dayvon Bennett was born. Part 2. A childhood shaped by violence. Dayvon's father was Walter E. Bennett, known in the streets as Silk. According to family members and later interviews, Silk was himself a documented member of the Black Disciples with a fearsome reputation in the neighborhood around Altgeld Park. But Silk's life as a gang member meant constant incarceration. He was in and out of jail throughout Dayvon's early childhood, leaving the boy's mother, Tasha, to raise him mostly alone. Dayvon had 6 half-siblings from his father and 3 from his mother, growing up in a crowded home where resources were scarce and the streets were always calling. In interviews years later, Von would speak about his father with a mix of reverence and pain. Silk was remembered as a legend on the block, someone who commanded respect despite the lifestyle that kept him locked up. On July 24, 2005, when Dayvon was 10 years old, his father was shot and killed outside a skating rink. According to Von's uncle, in a later interview, Silk was targeted by a sniper, shot from a distance in what appeared to be a planned assassination. The loss devastated young Dayvon. Years later, he would tweet and rap about how he couldn't sleep after his father's death. On Twitter, he regularly posted tributes to his father on his birthdays, memorializing the man who had shaped his early understanding of what it meant to be respected in the streets. Von later told interviewer 16 shot visuals that he got involved in gang activity in 4th grade around 2006, when he was approximately 11 or 12 years old. His father had been Black Disciples. His neighborhood was Black Disciples territory. For Von, joining wasn't really a choice. It was inheritance, environment, and the path of least resistance all rolled into one. By the time Von entered Hyde Park Academy High School, he was fully immersed in gang life. Multiple former classmates would later state in interviews that Von regularly brought firearms to school starting around age 13. One associate, Chop Squad, who attended school with both Von and fellow Chicago rapper G Herbo, claimed that Von would show off guns in class. G Herbo himself would later rap about this in a collaboration with Von called FaceTime, saying that Von showed him a revolver during freshman orientation, an experience that led G Herbo to begin bringing guns to school himself. Von's adolescence was marked by constant conflict. He and his friends from O Block, kids with names like T-Roy, Duke, BJ, Big A, would start with fistfights at school, scuffles with rival gang members on the bus or in the cafeteria. But those schoolyard fights quickly escalated. Guns replaced fists. What started as teenage posturing turned deadly serious. Hyde Park Academy became a place where Von and his rivals from blocks like STL/EBT and Jarrow City saw each other every day, building grudges that would last years and cost lives. On one occasion, according to stories that circulated years later, Von did a shooting on prom night while wearing his suit. He had even tweeted earlier that day, warning people not to try him while he was dressed up. True to his word, when someone tested him, Von allegedly responded with gunfire. This recklessness and willingness to use violence at any moment would become his calling card. Von's first arrest came in August 2010, when he was 16 years old. According to court records, he committed armed robbery at 64th and King Drive at 12:45 p.m., pulling a gun on a victim and stealing their vehicle. He was arrested 5 minutes later. The charges were serious: armed robbery with a firearm, and Von faced 21 to 45 years in prison under a plea deal. As a juvenile, he was instead sentenced to boot camp, an intense military-style program designed to shock young offenders straight. He was released early, but would be back behind bars within months. Von's second documented arrest came in November 12 for unlawful possession of a firearm. He would be booked into Cook County Jail and spend time incarcerated between December 10 and March 12, about 15 months total. During this time, his best friend T. Roy tweeted calling for his release. The two were inseparable, partners in everything, according to those who knew them. But it was during his next period of freedom, from March 12th to November 12th, that something changed in Dayvon Bennett. Multiple associates and Von himself would later describe this period as when he transformed from a street kid into something darker. The deaths of friends, people like O.D. Perry, Platoon, and later White White, would turn him, in his own words, into a demon. Part 3. The Streets Run Red, Allegations of Early Murders. A critical note on evidence and speculation. What follows in this section are allegations that have never been proven in court. Bennett was never charged with most of the murders discussed here, and these cases remain officially unsolved. The connections between Bennett and these deaths come primarily from circumstantial evidence, the timing of social media posts, analysis by online researchers and gang historians, and song lyrics that Bennett himself later claimed were fictional. While this circumstantial evidence has been compiled by researchers and discussed in some police documents, it's important to understand that correlation does not equal causation, and tweet timing is not proof of involvement. We present this information because it's part of the public narrative around Bennett's life, but we clearly label it as unproven allegation rather than established fact. To understand the allegations against Von during this period, we need to examine what was happening in Chicago more broadly. The early 2010s saw the rise of Chicago drill music, a subgenre of hip-hop characterized by dark, aggressive beats and lyrics that described real gang violence in unflinching detail. Artists like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and others from O Block were getting national attention for music that wasn't just entertainment. It was essentially real-time reporting of the gang war happening in their neighborhoods. Social media, particularly Twitter, played a huge role in escalating tensions. Gang members would taunt each other online, disrespect dead rivals, post their locations, and issue threats. These online beefs would quickly turn into real-world violence. Someone would tweet their location. Minutes later, shots would ring out. Then more tweets, mocking the dead, celebrating the kill, warning others they were next. Into this environment, Von became extraordinarily active on Twitter. Starting in June 12, his tweets from this period, many of which were captured before being deleted, paint a disturbing picture. Von would openly claim to be drilling, Chicago slang for shooting people, in the name of O.D. Perry. He tweeted about wanting to kill police officers. He warned people not to diss him and T. Roy. He claimed to shoot people like it's nothing. He said he'd been drilling since he was young. The timing of some of these tweets would become crucial later, when researchers and eventually police began trying to connect Von to specific unsolved murders. While Von was never charged in these early cases, online researchers, gang historians, and eventually police documents would connect him to several killings between 2012 and 2014. These connections came from multiple sources: the timing of Von's tweets, witness statements that didn't result in charges, and Von's own later references in songs after he became a rapper. One oft-cited example involves a man known as P5 or Crack, whose real name was Edric Johnson. On October 30th, 2012, which happened to be T. Roy's birthday, Von allegedly tweeted that he was drilling like OD and told people to check the stats. According to Chicago police reports, less than 30 minutes later, at around 9:13 a.m., P5 was shot multiple times in the 6200 block of South Eberhart Avenue. He was rushed to the hospital but pronounced dead at 9:54 a.m. Von's Twitter activity around this time was notable. Just 3 minutes before the recorded time of the shooting, Von tweeted, "Laughing my ass off," at 9:13, the exact time police recorded the shooting. Von tweeted about his gun making someone do 40 flips. Then, just after noon, he tweeted, "The early bird catches the worm." In the days that followed, Von's tweets became even more brazen. He tweeted wondering if he was messed up in the head and indicating he thought he'd gone crazy. 2 days later, he tweeted, "Damn, Modell got killed in October and crack. Who's going to get killed in November?" Stay tuned. Von was never charged in P5's death. No arrests were made. The case remains officially unsolved. The connection between Von and this murder is based entirely on the timing correlation between his tweets and the shooting. While the timing is striking, it's important to note that tweet timing alone is circumstantial evidence, not proof of involvement. The pattern, however, was unmistakable to online researchers paying attention. Von would hint at violence on social media, someone would die, and then Von would post again in what appeared to be celebration, using barely coded language. Another example involves a young man named Rodney Stewart, known as Boss Trell. On November 7th, 2012, Von tweeted about bodies dropping and beating cases. That evening, he tweeted that he was out sliding with T-Roy. T-Roy himself tweeted about going to get his gun. The following morning, the news reported the shooting of Boss Trell. The 17-year-old had been found with a gunshot wound to the head around 6:50 a.m. and was rushed to the hospital. While Boss Trell fought for his life, Von and T-Roy were active on Twitter. T-Roy tweeted "man down" only hours after the body was discovered. Von tweeted "distruggle" and suggested people weren't dying on time. T-Roy mockingly tweeted, "No, Trell, stay alive." Boss Trell was pronounced dead that night at 11:30 p.m. The next day, Von took to Twitter to mock him further, tweeting that STL doesn't stand for St. Lawrence, but instead for steady taking L's. He told people, "Don't worry about who killed who, just be glad that you didn't get killed and shut up." Again, Von was never charged. The case remains officially unsolved. Some alternative theories exist. One suggests Boss Trell was killed by someone trying to retrieve a gun that had been taken. But regardless of the truth, Von and T-Roy's Twitter activity suggested they were at minimum celebrating the death, if not responsible for it. The pattern continued. In late 2012 and early 2013, Von's Twitter account was a running commentary on violence in Chicago. He'd tweet about being ready to shoot random people in traffic. He'd declare himself an STL killer, St. Lawrence killer. He'd reference specific murders and mock deceased rivals. He'd count bodies. And incredibly, no one seemed to stop him. This wasn't happening in the shadows. Von was broadcasting his alleged involvement in murders to thousands of followers. He was creating a digital paper trail that would later be analyzed, frame by frame, tweet by tweet, trying to piece together just how many people Dayvon Bennett had allegedly killed. Part 4. The Murders That Changed Everything. While Von was allegedly racking up bodies and tweeting about it, 2 deaths would have particularly significant impacts on his life and would later become key to understanding his story. The first was the death of Tony Dunn. known as White White. On August 8, 2012, Von and White White went to a convenience store together on East 63rd Street and South Martin Luther King Drive. Von went inside while White White waited outside. At approximately 11:30 p.m., a gunman pulled up and shot White White in the back. A police officer on the scene even returned fire, hitting the shooter, who managed to escape. White White was pronounced dead in the early hours of August 9th, Von's 18th birthday. This killing devastated Von. He tweeted numerous times about White White's murder, describing how he'd just bought White White a pill and gone inside the store only to come back outside to find a crowd surrounding his shot friend. At first, Von believed White White would be okay. When he learned his friend had died, Von's tweets became darker. He pledged to kill his enemies publicly. He said this killing was what led him to act out. Years later, Von would elaborate on this in his song Demon, saying outright that witnessing White White's death on his 18th birthday was what turned him into a demon. He rapped that after this, he and T-Roy would be doing hits back-to-back to avenge the loss. The second death that profoundly affected Von and would later become central to a police investigation was that of Gakirah Barnes, known as K.Y. K.I. was a 17-year-old gangster disciple from the STL/EBT faction, rivals to Von's O-Block Black Disciples. The Chicago Sun-Times would later publish a feature article describing her as a female assassin in Chicago's gang war, comparing her to Snoop from the HBO series The Wire, a masculine female killer. Police suspected K.A.Y.'s involvement in multiple shootings, though she was never charged. Some investigators believed she was involved in the 2011 killing of O.D. Perry, the Black Disciples member after whom O-Block was named, though this was never proven. Von and Key had an extensive, strange history on Twitter. Their first interaction occurred in September 2012, when Von tweeted about beating up an OPP girl on the train. K.I. responded, indicating she'd been injured but wasn't bothered because her gun would put holes in her ops' faces. What followed was months of back and forth that mixed genuine animosity with what seemed like flirtation. Von would ask K.I. if she was a gangster or a bitch. She'd say she was a gangster. He'd ask why he never sees her when he comes to her block. She'd say he could die just like White White. He'd warn her to kill him because he'd kill her if she didn't. Then, bizarrely, when K.I. tweeted asking for retweets if people thought she looked good, Von retweeted it. When K.I. tweeted that she'd beaten up someone from O-Block and they should tell Von she's tough, Von replied that he could tell she was tough and jokingly asked if she was looking for a boyfriend. He began referring to her as wifey. In 2016, someone on the message board 4chan claimed to have hacked K.I.'s private DMs and published alleged messages between her and Von. According to these alleged DMs, Von had asked K.I. if she wanted to hook up. She replied she wasn't interested. Von said that when all of this is over, he'd have her. K.I. allegedly asked Von straight up if O-Block was plotting to kill her. Von reportedly said yes. There were people looking to kill her, but he didn't think he could do it because she seemed cool. He even asked when she was going to stop gangbanging. K.I. replied she wasn't going to stop, calling Von a goofy and asking when he was going to stop. Von said he was gangbanging until he died. K.I. agreed, saying she planned the same thing. Whether these DMs were authentic is impossible to verify. But what is verified is that Von and K.I. continued their public Twitter exchanges for years, with Von seemingly both threatening and attracted to her. Then came April 11th, 2014. Part 5. The Gakirah Barnes murder, a case that should have stuck. On April 11, 2014, 17-year-old Gakirah Barnes was standing on a porch in the 6400 block of South Eberhart Avenue at approximately 3:30 p.m. According to the Chicago Police Department report, Barnes was with two other individuals when a man wearing a gray hoodie and blue jeans approached and opened fire. Witnesses described the shooter hopping out of a vehicle, catching KYY and the others about to shoot dice. They ran into a gangway, but the shooter kept firing. One witness reported hearing the gunman shout, "Yeah, bitch," as he fired at KY multiple times. She was struck 9 times. She managed to crawl to a nearby porch before losing consciousness. She was transported to a hospital where she died approximately 2 hours later. On April 29, 2014, at 12:15 p.m., Dayvon Bennett was arrested at 7807 South Paulina Street. He was charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm in connection with Barnes's killing. According to Chicago Police Department documents released in July 2021, 7 years after the murder and 8 months after Bennett's death, 4 witnesses were brought in for identification. Witness 1 could not identify Bennett. Witness 2 pointed to Bennett but was unsure. Witness 3 claimed it was Bennett but couldn't make a positive identification. Witness 4 pointed directly to Bennett with confidence. Bennett was questioned about the murder and agreed to undergo a polygraph examination. The police had enough to believe they had their shooter. 4 witnesses, 1 positive ID, and Bennett in custody just days after the killing. But there was a problem. The witness statements were inconsistent. Some descriptions didn't fully match. There were discrepancies in the accounts of exactly what happened and when. And Cook County prosecutors made a determination. While they believed Bennett was the shooter, the inconsistencies meant they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. The official Chicago Police Department document, released after Bennett's death, stated the investigation revealed that the victim was killed by Dayvon Bennett. The CCSAO, Cook County State's Attorney's Office, reviewed the investigation and concurred that Bennett was positively identified as the offender in the incident and felt that they would be unable to meet the burden of proof in court and formally rejected charges. The document continued. It should be noted Dayvon Bennett was charged with first-degree murder recorded under HX2 81542 in that he shot and killed Malcolm Stuckey, no IR, on May 29, 14. So police believed Von killed KI. They had witness identification. They had him in custody. But the case never went to trial because prosecutors didn't think they could win a conviction. Von was released on April 30, 2014, without being charged. Hours after KI was pronounced dead, on April 11th, Von tweeted that he loves his gang and they love him. Then people began confirming on social media that KI had been killed. O-Block veteran Jay Hood would reveal in an interview years later that Von came back to O-Block immediately after the murder and told him what he'd done. The day after the hit, fellow Black Disciple rapper Lil Reese tweeted Von's catchphrase, "You got to do your thing," seemingly a congratulatory post to Von, who replied, "You got to." Von later tweeted that he needs a real one. Over the next few days, Von delivered a flurry of activity on Twitter. He tweeted that his ops don't scare him and the whole gang war is funny to him. He said he'd lost a lot of friends, so his enemies must die in retaliation. He tweeted saying people wouldn't believe the things he does in the streets and that he'll never tell. He even copied KI's earlier tweet about people not getting the picture until you put them in the frame. Then Von posted something particularly incriminating. He tweeted asking if the streets could be his Valentine, saying they're tired of dying. This was one day before the anniversary of KI's death. The next day, he made a biblical tweet saying God told him to cut her off. At this point, Von would seemingly update his body count to 6, openly tweeting about homicide in the air and that he'd made 6 people extinct for playing hard. He tweeted that he put people's brains in their lap and asked followers if they'd still be there for him when he gets 100 years in jail. But Von's celebration was short-lived. On April 29th, 18 days after KI's murder, he was arrested. Despite the strong circumstantial evidence and witness identification, he was released the next day when prosecutors rejected charges. Years later, after becoming a rapper, Von would make multiple references in songs that prosecutors and analysts interpreted as admissions to Barnes's murder. In War With Us from 2018, he rapped, "Put a pretty op bitch in the morgue. Call her drop dead gorgeous." In GTA from 2019, he said, "Keep a strap like KI." In Cousins from 2019, he rapped, "I kill women and men. Can't tell the difference." KI's family received no justice. The person police documents identify as her killer never faced trial. He walked free and weeks later would be implicated in another murder, one that would finally land him in jail for an extended period. Part 6. The Malcolm Stuckey Murder, An Innocent Life Taken. On the afternoon of May 29, 2014, there was a birthday party at 5722 South LaSalle Street in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood. The house was divided into 3 apartments, situated a couple blocks east of Interstate 94 and 3 miles west of the Museum of Science and Industry. Malcolm Stuckey was a 19-year-old college student at South Suburban College. He was a basketball player. He worked as a janitor at the Museum of Science and Industry. According to friends and family, he wasn't involved in gang activity. He was simply a young man with dreams, working his way through school, playing the sport he loved. That afternoon, Malcolm planned to stop by the birthday party for his friend, we'll call him CJ to protect privacy, before going to play basketball and returning for food. He pulled up in his burgundy Pontiac Grand Prix around 6 p.m. Inside the party, tensions were already simmering. Dayvon Bennett had arrived earlier with a woman named Jasmine Mitchell. According to court documents and witness testimony from the subsequent trial, Bennett spotted 2 rival gang members at the party. He left briefly. CJ's mother, who was throwing the party, told police that when she returned home from work around 5:15 p.m., she saw her son with other people on the front porch. Bennett was there, chatting with party guests, when he spotted the rival gang members, identified in court records as Timothy Robinson and Marquis Carpenter. He took off. "Don't start no mess in my house," CJ's mother told Bennett. According to witness statements, Bennett replied, "I'm not on that." But he was on that. Bennett left the party and called a friend, Michael Wade, known as Big Mike, telling him to bring a gun. According to court testimony, Bennett also called someone at the party and told them to bring the children inside. At that moment, Malcolm Stuckey arrived. He got out of his Pontiac, planning to smoke a cigar before heading to play basketball. He had no idea what was about to unfold. At approximately 6:09 p.m., Bennett and Big Mike returned. They approached from an alley with guns drawn. Witnesses heard 14 to 15 gunshots. Timothy Robinson, one of the intended targets, started running. Bennett chased him, firing. Malcolm Stuckey, who had been standing on the sidewalk, was struck by a bullet that tore into his brain. He collapsed immediately. Bennett then chased Marquis Carpenter, who had been shot in the left leg and was trying to escape. According to Big Mike's statements to police, Bennett was yelling, "Why are you running?" as he pursued Carpenter and fired at him. Big Mike also opened fire, shooting approximately 15 to 16 rounds at Timothy Robinson, striking him in the foot. When the shooting stopped, Malcolm Stuckey lay dead on the grass between the sidewalk and the street. Marquis Carpenter had been shot in the face, suffering a broken jaw. Timothy Robinson had been shot in the leg and foot. Chicago police responded to the scene at 6:10 p.m. Malcolm Stuckey was pronounced dead at 6:09 p.m., the same time the shooting occurred. He never had a chance. Malcolm's 16-year-old cousin, Modell McGraw, would be the one to discover his body. The image would haunt him. Tragically, 6 months later, Modell himself would be dead, allegedly killed by Bennett and T. Roy in what appeared to be retaliation. Malcolm Stuckey's death was devastating to everyone who knew him. His friend, Deontay Willis, told reporters, "He was supposed to be on his way to see me. He had stopped answering his phone." Willis also spoke about the broader problem of gun violence in Chicago, saying, "It's everywhere. It can happen anytime. You learn to look over your shoulder." The murder weapon in this case tells its own disturbing story about gun trafficking. According to federal court documents in United States v. Smalley, the gun was a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun, purchased on March 29, 2014, exactly 2 months before Malcolm's murder, in Natchez, Mississippi. The buyer was Jonathan Smalley, who ran a gun trafficking operation that funneled at least 25 firearms from Mississippi to Chicago gang members between 2009 and 2016. 11 of these weapons, including the one that killed Malcolm Stuckey. Ballistics testing confirmed the same gun was used in Malcolm's murder and in at least one other shooting shortly after, where Bennett allegedly fired it 12 times into another man who survived. Smalley would eventually be sentenced to more than 5 years in federal prison in 2018 for his gun trafficking operation. But Malcolm Stuckey was already long dead, another victim of easy gun access and a system that couldn't stop weapons from flowing from states with lax gun laws into one of America's most violence-plagued cities. Part 7. Justice Denied, the Malcolm Stuckey Trial. On July 20, 2014, at 3:06 p.m., Michael Wade was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder in connection with the shooting. 2 days later, on July 22, 2014, at 12:40 p.m., Dayvon Bennett was also arrested at his home and charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Big Mike initially agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. He would testify against Bennett as part of a plea deal. This was huge for the prosecution. They had an eyewitness who was present during the shooting, willing to describe exactly what happened and Bennett's role in it. But the case would drag on for over 3 years. Bennett was held in Cook County Jail from July 14 to December 17, awaiting trial. During that time, several things happened that would ultimately lead to his acquittal. First, witnesses became hard to find, or their stories changed. In cases involving gang violence, witness intimidation is common. People fear retaliation if they testify. Some witnesses who initially spoke to police became unavailable or gave inconsistent statements when prosecutors tried to prepare for trial. Second, and most critically, Big Mike changed his mind. On October 23, 2017, Bennett was placed in a bullpen in Cook County Jail with Big Mike, another associate named THF Gucci, and an OPP from 051 Young Money who had a tattoo saying, "Fuck LA," a reference to the deceased L.A. Capone, a rapper affiliated with Bennett's faction. According to later accounts, Big Mike helped Bennett slip his arm out of handcuffs, and Von attacked the rival, with Gucci joining in by kicking him while he was still restrained. This incident seemed to solidify the bond between Bennett and Big Mike. When it came time for trial, Big Mike withdrew his cooperation agreement. He refused to testify against Bennett. This was catastrophic for prosecutors. Without Big Mike's testimony, and with other witnesses unable or unwilling to provide consistent accounts, prosecutors lacked the evidence needed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Bennett was the shooter. The defense could argue that Big Mike was the primary shooter, and Bennett might not have even fired his weapon, or that the shooting happened too chaotically for anyone to know exactly who shot Malcolm Stuckey. On December 6, 2017, after more than 3 years in jail awaiting trial, Dayvon Bennett was acquitted of all charges related to Malcolm Stuckey's death. Big Mike, however, was not so fortunate. He was convicted of aggravated battery with a firearm for shooting Timothy Robinson. He received a 16-year sentence for that crime, but because he backed out of his cooperation agreement with prosecutors, he received an additional 12 years, a total of 28 years in prison. Michael Wade will spend decades behind bars. Dayvon Bennett walked free. Malcolm Stuckey's family was devastated. Their son, a college student with no gang affiliations who simply stopped by a friend's birthday party, was dead, and the man they believed killed him, the man police and prosecutors believed killed him, would never face consequences. Years later, after Bennett became a successful rapper, Malcolm's family would publicly condemn him on social media. They watched as the person they believed murdered their son made millions of dollars rapping about the street life that took Malcolm's life. They saw him celebrated, given magazine interviews, featured on Billboard charts. Their son was in the ground, and his alleged killer was signing autographs. In later songs, Bennett would make what appeared to be references to the Malcolm Stuckey shooting. On a feature called What's Next by Jizzle Bucks, Bennett seemed to imply that Malcolm wasn't the intended target, but was a witness who had to be eliminated. The lyrics suggested Malcolm was simply outside on the sidewalk when the shooting occurred and had to be taken out because he saw what happened. This cold calculation that an innocent bystander had to die simply because he was present speaks to the level of violence Bennett was allegedly willing to deploy. Malcolm Stuckey was 19 years old. He was working, going to school, trying to build a future, and according to Bennett's own apparent admission in song lyrics, he died simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Malcolm Stuckey case represents one of the clearest examples of justice system failure in Bennett's story. Police knew who the shooter was. They had physical evidence. They had witnesses. They had a co-defendant willing to testify. But witness intimidation, the chaos of gang violence, and Big Mike's last-minute decision to protect Bennett meant that no one was held accountable for taking an innocent young man's life. Part 8. From Cage to Stage, The Birth of a Rap Career. December 6, 2017. After 1,267 days in Cook County Jail, Dayvon Bennett, walked out of the gates a free man. Video footage captured on social media showed him cutting off his ankle monitor, throwing up gang signs, celebrating his freedom. He had beaten a murder charge. He had escaped what could have been a life sentence. But the question was, what would he do with this second chance? According to Bennett himself, in later interviews with 16-shot visuals, the first thing he did after being released was meet up with his friend E-Dog from O Block. And what did they do? They went and bought a gun. At the time of his release, Bennett had no plans to become a rapper. In fact, he'd tweeted years earlier that if he ever starts rapping, people should kill the person closest to them because something wasn't right. Music wasn't his path. The streets were all he knew. But one person hadn't forgotten about Dayvon Bennett during his 3.5 years behind bars. Lil Durk, Dirk Banks, was by this time one of Chicago's biggest rap stars. He'd known Von since childhood. They'd grown up in the same neighborhoods, been part of the same circles. And Dirk had a vision. Dirk had been tweeting his support for Von throughout the trial, apparently calling him regularly and even helping provide money for a lawyer. When Von walked free, Dirk welcomed him with open arms. In interviews, Dirk would later say he saw raw potential in Von. He recognized that Von's real-life experiences in the streets gave him a level of credibility and storytelling ability that couldn't be manufactured. But Von himself later admitted that his initial interest in Dirk wasn't entirely pure. He told interviewers that at first he planned to hang around Dirk and rob people in his circle until he got to $100,000. That was Von's goal. Get $100 grand however he could, by any means necessary. After coming home, Von didn't immediately jump into music. He wanted to enjoy his freedom. Social media posts from late 2017 and early 2018 show Von posing in new clothes, flexing his newfound freedom, posting pictures on Instagram. His enemies, including people like FBG Cash, would leave threatening comments, but Von's friends were looking out for him, and no one was looking out more than Lil Durk. Durk was working on his 2018 mixtape, Just Cause You're Weighted, and that tape featured a track called Durk and Von Crazy. Soon after getting out of jail, Von found himself sitting in the back of Durk's car, previewing this future classic before its release. The song referenced Von's case, with Durk rapping that a witness went missing and now Von is coming home. Durk was clearly inspired by Von's return and wanted to help him transition to civilian life. They spent Christmas 2017 together, listening to classic Chicago drill anthems by L.A. Capone. In January 2018, Von was seen on social media walking through O Block, showing the world he was back in the streets, untouched despite everything he'd allegedly done. But Von's old habits died hard. In February 2018, he tweeted that he was riding around with a gun and weed. Then, on February 14th, the one-year anniversary of his friend T-Roy's death, Von was arrested at O Block. Police claimed he ran from them, threw a gun, and battered officers during the arrest. Body camera footage of this arrest later became public, showing an angry Von telling police with pride that he just beat a body and 2 attempted murders. Von's mugshot from that arrest circulated online, showing a furious expression, but he was out within days, tweeting that he believed cops had it out for him because he escaped the murder charges. He boasted that he would never let them get him. Still, even with these brushes with law enforcement, Lil Durk continued to invest in Von. They spent increasing amounts of time together, with Von making regular trips to Atlanta, where Dirk was based. Then, in February 2018, something significant happened. Von was reunited with another friend who'd beaten a murder charge, THF Beizhu, who had been acquitted of a 2014 murder charge for a shooting that occurred in 2009. Dirk saw an opportunity. He had two certified Chicago shooters who'd both beaten murder cases. Both had real street credibility. Both had stories that weren't fabricated or exaggerated. They'd lived every word they could rap. Dirk's plan wasn't for them to keep shooting. It was to transform these hardened street figures into rap superstars, to turn their real-life experiences into art, to make them the realest rappers who had ever rapped. Von started posting pictures in the studio with Dirk, hinting at an upcoming career in the rap game. On May 27, 2018, King Von and THF Beizhu released their first song together, Beat That Body. The title wasn't subtle. It was about both of them beating murder charges. Von's lyrics were shocking, essentially admitting to catching bodies, beating the cases, and planning to catch more. This song, with its brazen admission of violence, should have been a red flag. But instead, it became exactly what made Von's music irresistible to drill fans. Here was someone who wasn't just rapping about the street life. According to police documents and court records, he'd lived it. He'd been arrested for murder. He'd sat in jail for 3 years. He'd stood trial. And he'd walked free. The backstory was perfect. The credibility was unquestionable. And Dirk, according to later interviews, said people in Chicago instantly went crazy for Von's music. But Von didn't initially seem optimistic about his rap career. He barely promoted Beat That Body and appeared to have no plans to give up his full-time role as an O-Block shot caller. Because even as Von was recording his first songs, violence continued to play out in the streets. And Von, according to various sources, remained plugged into the action. Part 9. The Songs and the Streets. Violence continues. While Von was in jail from 2014 to 2017, numerous people from O-Block and surrounding areas had been killed. His friend T. Roy, his partner in crime, his right-hand man, had been shot and killed in a convenience store on Valentine's Day 2017. Von's people posted Twitter tributes, and Von later opened up about the devastating moment when he got the news about T. Roy's death while locked up. Von took T. Roy's death extremely seriously. Even after becoming a famous rapper, he would threaten to kill trolls who DM'd him mocking T. Roy on his birthday. The loss of his closest friend seemed to fuel something darker in Von. A need not just for revenge, but for systematic elimination of enemies. After T. Roy's death, a new group formed in O-Block called Get Back Gang. This was a hardened crew of shooters whose sole focus was to get revenge, to get back for T. Roy and other O-Block members who'd been killed. Members included people like Muwop, C. Thang, C. Murder, and others who would later become central to federal investigations. One person Get Back Gang allegedly killed was a man known as Can't Get Right, real name DeAndre Wallace. On June 15, 2018, around 9:50 p.m., Can't Get Right was waiting for food outside a store on the 400 block of East 63rd Street. Two people pulled up, waited outside, and when they spotted their target, they ran up and opened fire. Can't Get Right was killed. An innocent bystander, a man who was simply sweeping outside the restaurant, was also killed in the shooting. The shooting and immediate aftermath were captured on CCTV footage footage too graphic to describe in detail, but which shows the calculated brutality of the attack. King Von was in Atlanta with Lil Durk's team when this murder occurred. But hours after the killing, Von went live on Instagram alongside Memo 600, mocking the murder in real time. They lit a blunt and said they were smoking can't get right, asking viewers what just happened. When people started commenting can't get up, the O Block crew seemed to find this hilarious. Von said it was 2 people down and they'd have to roll another one. They mocked the ops posting tributes to their fallen friend on Instagram. They joked about how the victim got a fresh fade from the gun. Von came back on camera saying can't get right, must have known he was going to die, and that no one would care, he's gone. Von's involvement in this killing is debated. He was in another city when it happened. But what's not debatable is his celebration of it, his detailed knowledge of how it occurred, and his apparent role as someone who ordered or encouraged these hits. Friends of Can't Get Right would post on social media that they believed Von paid for the hit. Only days before the Can't Get Right murder, Von had tweeted that you can only diss or smoke a dead person if you actually played a role in killing them. His celebration of Can't Get Right's death seemed to indicate he believed he had played such a role, whether by ordering it, financing it, or planning it. This would become Von's pattern. Violence would occur, and he would celebrate publicly while maintaining just enough distance to avoid direct culpability. He was in another city. He wasn't the shooter. He just knew about it. He just talked about it. He just rapped about it. And somehow, that was supposed to make it okay. On July 31st, 2018, Lil Durk's Only the Family Involved Volume 1 compilation album was released. It featured Von's song, Problems, a track entirely about Von having hitters who catch bodies for him. The song included an intro where Von shouted out, "Get back, gang." The lyrics described killing both targets and witnesses. Von rapped that killing was his hobby and that his loyal shooters were the ones catching bodies for him. A music video for Problems dropped on Von's 24th birthday, August 9th, 2018. It appeared on Lil Durk's official YouTube channel. Here was Von openly admitting in song format that he had people killing for him, and the music video was being professionally produced and promoted. The violence wasn't hidden anymore, it was the product being sold. Lil Durk was impressed with Von's murder raps. He tweeted that Von was next up in the rap game. Von responded by saying he'd soon drop music with Durk and that he was switching up, not associating with anyone he used to know. But even as Von laid foundations for a rap career, he couldn't stop being reckless. Around this time, Von appeared in a viral Instagram live clip training a small child on O Block to disrespect rival dead gang members and teaching the kid to shoot people in the head with a water pistol. Von was creating the next generation of killers, normalizing violence for children who should have been playing games, not being indoctrinated into gang warfare. Von tweeted about having killers around him and posted pictures of his whole crew. People would eventually annotate these pictures, speculating on how many people each O Block member had killed. The attention brought more police scrutiny to O Block. By late August 2018, Von was seen on Instagram Live observing arrests taking place on the block itself, joking that he had his shoes tied in case he needed to run. Part 10. A Violent Autumn, the Dusky and Wooski Shootings. On October 9, 2018, Chicago rapper Dusky the Man, real name Dusky Chris, was shot in the head on the 5600 block of South Michigan Avenue around 3:50 p.m. The shooting appeared to be a drive-by from a passing brown vehicle. He died shortly after. The evening before Dusky's murder, Von had tweeted that there was a dark cloud over Chicago. A few days after Dusky's death, Von went live with Lil Durk, saying he was smoking Dusky, K.I., Hookah, and P5, a list of dead rivals that read like a scorecard. Only a week after Dusky's murder, on October 18, 2018, Von released a new song called War With Us. The track featured the lyrics about putting a pretty op bitch in the morgue, widely interpreted as a reference to K.I.'s murder. Von also said he was a hitman. Von ended the song literally describing himself as a professional killer, but Von's biggest target during this period was a gangster disciple from Tuckerville named Wooski. Von and Wooski had been going back and forth since 2012. They'd traded threats on Twitter. They'd tried to catch each other at convenience stores. They'd argued about who had more bodies and who would die first. Wooski had also become a rapper, releasing a song called Computers at the start of 2018 that dissed multiple Dead O Block members, including Big A, J Money, White, Chino, and O.D. Perry. Wooski ended the song saying they were hunting for the killers of Poppy and TB, murders allegedly committed by O Block's Get Back gang. The beef between Von and Wooski was incredibly personal. When Dusky, who was close with Wooski, was killed, Von and others from O Block FaceTimed Wooski, telling him they were going to catch him by surprise. Then came the plan. Dusky's funeral was scheduled for October 22, 2018. O Block knew Wooski would attend, so they allegedly decided to shoot up the funeral. On the afternoon of October 22nd, outside the church where Dusky's funeral was being held, a car pulled up. People jumped out and began shooting into the crowd, firing indiscriminately but looking specifically to kill Wooski. 6 people were hit in the shooting. Wooski himself was shot in the head, but miraculously survived. Von's Twitter activity after this shooting was telling. He tweeted comparing himself to Jesus. He tweeted, "Laugh now, cry later, and game over, we won." Fellow O Block shooter Muop retweeted and agreed. Over the next few years, Von would drop numerous disrespectful lyrics referencing the shooting of Wooski. In Grandson for President, he rapped that Wooski got shot in his head and now has to take medicine for his injuries. In GTA, he rapped, "Who shot Wooski? How would I know?" In Go and Get Him, he said he'd be at your funeral on time to give your mother a tissue. In Back Again, he literally said that he slides at funerals, shoots everyone outside, and that Wooski is going to feel this one, adding, "I bet Wooski's still twitching, he changed something different." These are some of the most disrespectful lyrics imaginable, but they also served as self-incrimination. Von was telling the world exactly what he'd done or been part of, and somehow no one stopped him. Wooski, despite being shot in the head at a funeral, is still alive today. He outlived King Von, just as he'd promised on Twitter back in 2012. But the fact that Von felt comfortable shooting up a funeral, a sacred space where families gather to mourn, showed how far he'd descended. There were no boundaries anymore, no sacred spaces, no lines he wouldn't cross. Part 11. The Atlanta Incident, when violence followed success. By early 2019, Von's music career was taking off. He'd released several songs that were gaining traction. Crazy Story, which would drop in December 18, was about to make him a viral sensation. Von was spending more time in Atlanta with Durk, enjoying the fruits of his early success. Then came February 5th, 2019, around 5:49 a.m. The location was outside the Varsity Restaurant in Midtown Atlanta. According to Atlanta Police Department reports and court testimony, an altercation occurred in the parking lot. The victim was 23-year-old Alexander Witherspoon, also spelled Weatherspoon in some reports. He was shot in the thigh and survived. Prosecutors alleged the incident involved robbery of approximately $30,000 in cash, jewelry, and the victim's vehicle. Surveillance cameras captured the incident. At a June 14, 2019 probable cause hearing, an Atlanta police detective testified that video showed individuals firing weapons. The detective stated that footage showed one person firing from a vehicle and another person on foot. 4 people were allegedly involved: Dayvon Bennett, Dirk Banks, Lil Durk, THF Bayzoo, and a 4th individual named Amir Hellerbands Golston. The judge found probable cause and charged Bennett and his co-defendants with criminal attempt to commit murder, aggravated assault, participation in criminal street gang activity, possession of a firearm during commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. What's particularly interesting about this case is the alleged involvement of Lil Durk's custom Jeep Trackhawk. Detectives claimed that video showed someone shooting from this distinctive vehicle, a camouflage-wrapped Jeep with a large 300 on the side that Durk was known to own. Durk had even posted clips of this car to Twitter with the caption, "Spin, spin," slang for doing drive-by shootings. Von himself had reposted these clips. The afternoon after the shooting, Von posted on Twitter with a handful of cash and a gun on the couch next to him. Later, he tweeted, "You never know who's going to snitch when the cops come." The next day, Von tweeted asking if you can be a killer and a good person at the same time. A few days later, on February 9, 2019, Von was seen in the background of an Instagram Live with rapper Asian Doll, talking to his friend on the phone, seemingly about the shooting. He appeared to be telling his friend that he made all the wrong moves and that the feds were now watching him. But Von wasn't too worried. On February 21st, he tweeted that he was ready to catch another body. The next day, he went live on Instagram with fans, showing off money from features, dissing dead rivals, and saying he wasn't a rapper, just a gangster who raps for the money. The Atlanta authorities were building their case slowly. On May 4, 2019, a massive force of over 30 Chicago police officers raided O Block to arrest Von. Dramatic footage shows him being tackled to the ground while an enraged mob of his friends accused the cops of stealing his chain. Police had to draw assault rifles to keep the crowd at bay. Von was transferred to Atlanta to face charges on May 17th. While he sat in jail, his music career continued to rise. On May 20th, Crazy Story 2.0 dropped with Lil Durk's verse. The remix was a huge street hit, reaching close to 100 million views on YouTube and landing Von his first spot on the Billboard Global 200 chart. Then, on May 11th, only a week after Von's arrest, something unexpected happened. The 4th person who'd been in the Trackhawk that night, Hellerbands, was shot and killed outside a Miami nightclub before facing any charges. A Miami Beach spokesperson revealed he was wanted in Atlanta for attempted murder and armed robbery. On May 13th, THF Bayzoo was also arrested in Chicago, charged with being a fugitive from justice in connection with the Atlanta shooting. Lil Durk turned himself in on May 30th, 2019, doing a TV news interview where he said he was turning himself in to face the charges and that he was releasing a song called Turn Myself In. An Atlanta judge revealed they believed there was enough evidence to charge both Durk and Von with attempted murder. Dirk and Von appeared together in an iconic televised court appearance. Their defense team put forward a self-defense plea, suggesting the man who was shot actually initiated the altercation. After legal back and forths, Lil Durk was granted release on a $250,000 bond. Von was released on a $300,000 bond on June 22, 2019. Part of Von's bail conditions were that he and Dirk could not be around each other, as Von later revealed in a no-jumper interview. But they would still release music together, dropping Like That on July 9, 2019. Despite facing serious attempted murder charges, both Von and Dirk continued to rap about criminality. Von's lyrics still hinted at having killed K.I. and continued dissing dead rivals. The charges against Lil Durk were eventually dropped in October 2022. In January 2023, after Von's death, the district attorney's office filed a motion to dismiss all charges. The motion stated, "The facts of this case have been reviewed, and although probable cause existed for the defendant's arrest, the decision at this time is not to prosecute." Critically, the statement added, if co-defendant Dayvon Bennett, aka King Von, had not died in 2020, he would have been indicted for this incident. So once again, Bennett escaped consequences for his alleged actions, this time only because he'd be killed before facing trial. Part 12, Crazy Story, the song that changed everything. While Von was dealing with legal troubles in Atlanta, a song he'd recorded before his arrest was about to change his life forever. On December 6, 2018, exactly 1 year after beating his murder charge, Von released Crazy Story. The song was a storytelling masterpiece in the drill format. Von rapped an entire narrative about plotting an armed robbery on a rich drug dealer, using a woman to set him up. The robbery goes wrong when Von's ops catch him lacking, resulting in a shootout. The accompanying music video brought the story to life, with Von playing the main character and narrator. Von ended the song with what would become his iconic catchphrase, "From 64th and from 65th, we not from 63rd," shouting out "O Block" on 64th and 65th King Drive while dissing his ops from 63rd and St. Lawrence/Eberhart. Dissing 63rd became a huge part of Von's brand. He later sold merchandise showing the street sign for 63rd with a big cross over it. The popularity of Crazy Story was explosive. It racked up 3 million views in a week. Today, it sits at over 69 million views on YouTube and has been certified triple platinum by the RIA. Von was on a high after the release, tweeting a picture with a caption about people seeing you shine and forgetting you're dangerous. The success of Crazy Story got Von significant mainstream attention. He'd already appeared on The Breakfast Club with Lil Durk in November 18, where Charlemagne the God asked him directly about his murder charge. Von, with Durk trying to help him navigate the questions, confirmed he'd beaten the case, but was coy about whether he actually committed the murder. He told Charlemagne he couldn't get a normal job in Chicago because he'd done so much dirt that he'd probably be killed on sight if seen working a regular job. Von's debut mixtape, Grandson Volume 1, dropped on September 19, 2019, while he was still in jail for the battery charge. He'd beaten up a man who called his girlfriend a bitch. The project landed at number 75 on the Billboard 200. Impressive for a debut from someone sitting in a jail cell. The mixtape featured What It's Like, an introspective track where Von opened up about life in the gang. catching people who killed his friends while in jail, and witnessing his friend D. Rose getting sentenced to 40 years for a 2014 murder. Vaughn said the cops who locked up D. Rose, C-Day, and Rondo Number 9 told him they were trying to catch him too, but they never could. Vaughn got out of jail on October 10, 2019, and immediately began promoting his music and announcing tour dates. He played huge shows with fans going crazy. His music was resonating not just because of the beats or his flow, but because people knew the stories weren't fiction. When Vaughn rapped about beating a murder charge, he'd actually beaten one. When he rapped about shootings, police documents suggested he'd been involved in them. The authenticity was undeniable and disturbing. Part 13. The Hookah to the O music video, foreshadowing FBG Duck's death. On February 20th, 2020, Vaughn released one of his biggest songs, Hookah to the O. It was another storytelling track with a catchy chorus where Vaughn shouted out, "O Block." But this time, the story was chilling. In the song and accompanying music video, Vaughn meets a woman who leads him to his rival, a rapper clearly meant to represent FBG Duck. Vaughn ends the song saying he shoots this Duck character, literally rapping that he killed him and left him on the curb. The music video reenacted the entire scenario, showing Vaughn shooting the Duck character dead. The day Vaughn released the video, he tweeted that everything he says in his music is made up and he's just rapping to make money for his family. But behind the scenes, according to FBI documents that would be declassified years later, Vaughn had allegedly put a $100,000 bounty on FBG Duck's head. This is where Vaughn's alleged behavior crosses from street violence into something more calculated and sinister. He'd achieved success. He was making money. He had options. But his compulsion to eliminate enemies, particularly FBG Duck, remained strong. FBG Duck, real name Carlton Weekly, was a 26-year-old drill rapper affiliated with Hookahville, the Gangster Disciples faction that was O Block's main rival. Duck had known Vaughn since they attended Hyde Park Academy together. In 2014, Duck claimed on Twitter to have plotted to beat Vaughn up on the school bus. Their feud was over a decade old. Duck had also become successful in drill music. His 2017 single, Slide, brought him mainstream attention and earned him a recording contract with Sony Music. A remix featuring 21 Savage was later certified gold. Duck popularized the term clout in Chicago hip-hop, referring to himself as Big Clout. Duck had released diss tracks aimed at O Block, mocking dead members and challenging Vaughn and his crew. Vaughn had responded with "Took her to the O," essentially making a music video fantasy about killing Duck. The video got 1 million views in 24 hours. It would eventually be certified triple platinum. For Vaughn, the song and video weren't enough. According to FBI documents, he wanted Duck dead for real. Part 14, August 4th, 2020, the FBG Duck murder. On the afternoon of August 4th, 2020, 26-year-old Carlton Weekly was shopping in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. It was a beautiful day. He was at Oak Street, often described as the Rodeo Drive of Chicago, an upscale, high-end shopping district far from the violence of the South Side. Duck was with his girlfriend, Cachet Williams, shopping for his young son's birthday. Around 4:26 p.m., Duck was outside the Dolce & Gabbana store at the first block of East Oak Street. It was a public place, busy with shoppers and tourists. Duck likely felt safe in such an open, affluent area. Then 2 vehicles arrived, a silver Chrysler 300 and a black Ford Fusion. According to federal court documents and witness testimony, 4 masked gunmen exited the vehicles. They had been provided Duck's location and had driven 30 minutes from O Block to the Gold Coast specifically to kill him. The shooting lasted approximately 12 seconds. The gunman fired 38 rounds. Duck was struck 16 times and pronounced dead at the scene. Williams and another man, Dayvon Bennett, were shot but survived. Someone posted a 12-minute video depicting the crime scene immediately after Duck's death. The footage, too graphic to describe in detail, showed Duck writhing in pain on the ground in the final moments of his life. The brazen, broad daylight hit made international news. Reporters compared the killing to a Chicago mob boss hit from the 1930s. 7 minutes after Duck's death, King Von tweeted a goat emoji, seemingly congratulating himself or his crew for pulling off the hit he'd allegedly been plotting for years. This was possibly the 9th or 10th murder Von was connected to, depending on which allegations are verified. Perhaps realizing how obvious the timing was, Von tweeted the following day, denying involvement and saying everybody blames him for everything. He later tweeted that he and Duck had settled their differences before his death and suggested they were even going to make a song together. This appeared to be a transparent lie, an attempt to distance himself from the murder. But Von's music would tell a different story. The day after Duck's death, Von and Dirk dropped All These N-Hocks, a track without specific lyrics about Duck, but released as what seemed like a victory lap. OTF Duty Low would later release a song with Von, where they rapped about people getting killed while shopping, and Von giving out $100,000 to send his boys to do it. In Don't Miss with DQ, Von rapped that Duck got nailed. Even Lil Durk would later release a song called Should've Ducked, directly dissing Duck after his death. The murder of FBG Duck was prosecuted at the federal level under ROTCO statutes. On October 13, 2021, federal authorities arrested 5 individuals: Charles C. Murder Liggins, 32, Kenneth Kenny Mac Robertson, 30, Marcus Muops Smart, 24, Von's close associate, who appeared frequently in his social media posts, Christopher C. Thang, Thomas, 24, and to Carlos Los Offord, 32. A 6th defendant, Ralph Teasy Turpin, 34, was later added to the indictment. All were charged with murder in aid of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and firearm violations. A 7th individual, Ezel Zel Muna Rawls, was believed to be involved but died on August 24, 2021, before he could be charged. The trial began in late 2023 and lasted over 3 months. Prosecutors presented extensive evidence. Surveillance footage from Parkway Gardens showing defendants entering vehicles just before the murder. License plate reader data tracking both vehicles from the South Side to Gold Coast. Cell phone records placing defendants at the crime scene. A shell casing found in the seized Chrysler matching casings from the crime scene. Testimony from cooperating witnesses with plea deals. One witness testified that Robertson told him Bennett had placed a $100,000 bounty on Weekly. FBI documents showing Bennett purchased $128,000 in diamond-encrusted O-block pendants from an Atlanta jewelry store, some before Weekly's death, some after. Photo evidence showing Marcus Smart with Bennett at the jewelry store on August 10, 2020, 6 days after Duck's murder. Bennett's music video took her to the O, showing him killing a character named Duck. On January 17, 2024, after approximately 16 hours of deliberation over 3 days, the jury convicted all 6 defendants of murder in aid of racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder. Most were also convicted of firearms charges. All 6 face mandatory life sentences without possibility of parole. According to multiple news reports, federal prosecutors stated that if Bennett had not died in November 2020, he would have been indicted and tried alongside the other defendants as the person who ordered the hit. Duck's mother, Lashina Weekly, cried and hugged family members as the verdict was read. She later told reporters, "When stuff like that happens to a good person, regardless of what somebody else thinks of them, it ain't gonna go unpunished. Knowing that they will not do that to another family brings me comfort, knowing they will not terrorize nobody else. They're done, the whole crew. O-Block and everything of it is done." Part 15, November 6, 2020, the final night. While King Von was allegedly orchestrating murders and achieving rap success, he was also feuding with another rapper, NBA Youngboy, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The beef stemmed partly from Von allegedly having a relationship with the mother of Youngboy's child, a woman named Jania. Pictures surfaced of Von spending time with Jania, and speculations swirled about whether they'd created a sex tape. Youngboy responded by posting that he'd make sure his son grows up and sleeps with Von's daughter, since Von was trolling him with his baby mother. The feud escalated from there, with Von making threats and Youngboy's associate, Quando Rondo, getting involved. Von was also on again, off again with a female rapper named Asian Doll. Their relationship was tumultuous and public. When things were good, Von would show off gifts from her. When they were bad, he'd tweet about breakups. Asian Doll even ended up briefly connecting with NBA Youngboy during one of her splits from Von, which only intensified the animosity. On October 30th, 2020, Von released his debut studio album, Welcome to O-Block. The timing was notable. It was the anniversary of T-Roy's birthday and the anniversary of P5's murder. The album peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and was later certified platinum. It contained some of Von's most revealing lyrics, including songs where he seemingly admitted to multiple murders. In Demon, Von rapped that he'd killed 7 people, saying, "Bodies, I got a few, 4 plus 3, 3 plus 2. Some interpreted this as 7 kills and 5 assists. In Armed and Dangerous, which opened the album, Von rapped that cops were onto him. In The Code, he rapped about splitting $100,000 with his team, the same amount FBI documents alleged he'd put on Duck's head. Von recorded a freestyle for LA Leakers where he rapped that he had 7 bodies. He did an interview with DJ Academics where, when asked about FBG Duck's death, Von slowly ate cereal while claiming to be hurt by it, an unconvincing performance that many saw as mocking. The album's success meant Von should have been celebrating. Instead, 8 days after its release, he'd be dead. On November 6, 2020, Von performed at Opium nightclub in Atlanta, celebrating his album release. After 1 a.m., his entourage left the club. Instead of returning to their Airbnb as planned, Von's vehicle diverted to Monaco Hookah Lounge at 255 Trinity Avenue Southwest. Von's manager, 100K Track, later told DJ Vlad that his team was blindsided by the changing plan. At approximately 3:23 a.m., Von and his crew arrived at Monaco. Quando Rondo and his associate, Timothy Lol Tim Leaks, were also present. Surveillance footage captured what happened next. Von approached Quando Rondo and struck him, initiating a physical fight. Von and others from his crew began beating Quando on the ground. Multiple people were involved, punching and kicking. Then Lul Tim, who was in a nearby vehicle, exited with a firearm and shot Von multiple times. Von was struck 5 times, 3 times in the back, once in the right groin, once in the left shoulder. Von's associates returned fire. One associate, later identified as Slutty, attempted to shoot Lul Tim at point-blank range, but his weapon jammed. 2 plainclothes Atlanta police officers working security nearby believed they were under attack and opened fire. In the chaos, 6 people total were shot. Slutty was killed by police. Another O-Block member, Mark Blakely, was killed, caught in the crossfire. Lul Tim was shot by Von's associates but survived. Another associate, Louis, was shot in the head by police but survived, though with permanent injuries he would die in 2025. Von's manager was grazed by a bullet but survived. Von was dragged to a waiting car by MUOP and other O-Block members and rushed to Grady Memorial Hospital. He was admitted in critical condition and went into emergency surgery. Despite doctors' efforts, Dayvon Bennett was pronounced dead at 4:48 a.m. He was 26 years old. Timothy Leaks was arrested on November 7, 2020, and charged with felony murder. However, on August 2023, all charges were dropped under Georgia's Stand Your Ground law. Prosecutors determined Leaks acted in defense of Quando Rondo, who was being beaten by multiple attackers. Surveillance footage supported this determination. The irony was stark. A man allegedly responsible for multiple deaths died when someone defended another person from his attack. The act was ruled justified self-defense. Part 16. The Aftermath, Retribution and Federal Charges. Von's death sparked immediate reactions. Friends and affiliates from STL/EBT, people whose friends Von had allegedly killed, posted tributes to their fallen ones, suggesting they were happy Von would meet them in the afterlife. Billionaire Black posted a picture of Modell McGraw. Someone who'd been shot alongside Modell posted a picture of FBG Duck. P5's cousin posted on Facebook that he'd been praying for the day Von would be killed. Crack's family posted their relief that their friend's alleged killer was gone. On Von's side, Asian Doll claimed to want to die when the news broke. Lil Durk mourned the loss of his twin. Even Drake posted a tribute. 12 days after Von's final tweet, someone took control of his account and released a statement thanking everyone who supported him. Von's funeral was held on November 14, 2020. Finding a funeral home willing to take his body was difficult due to fears of violence. When a location was finally secured, the funeral was announced with only 1 day's notice. Von was buried in Chicago, but being such a divisive figure, his grave would be disrespected by enemies for years to come. He was memorialized in a mural in O-Block, though it was later removed. The cycle of violence didn't end with Von's death. On August 19, 2022, 21 months after Von was killed, Quando Rondo and his cousin Saviaya Lulpab Robinson were at a gas station in Los Angeles. Multiple shooters opened fire on their vehicle, firing at least 18 rounds. Lulpab was killed. Quando Rondo survived. On October 24, 2024, federal authorities arrested Lil Durk on murder-for-hire charges. 5 only the family associates were also arrested. Kayvon London Grant, DeAndre Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Brian Lindsay, and Asa Houston. According to federal court documents, prosecutors allege Banks orchestrated the hit on Quando Rondo in retaliation for Von's death. Credit cards linked to OTF and Banks were allegedly used to book flights, hotels, and rental cars for the hitmen. The conspiracy allegedly resulted in Robinson's death when shooters missed Quando Rondo. If convicted, Lil Durk faces life in federal prison. The case is ongoing as of this writing. The man who helped Von become a rap star, who signed him, who promoted him, who collaborated with him, now faces spending the rest of his life in prison for allegedly ordering a retaliatory killing for Von's death. Part 17. The Victims' Lives Cut Short. This story would be incomplete without acknowledging those who lost their lives, the real human cost of the violence. Malcolm Stuckey was 19 years old, a college student at South Suburban College, a basketball player, and a janitor at the Museum of Science and Industry. He wasn't involved in gang activity. He stopped by a friend's birthday party to smoke a cigar before playing basketball. According to Bennett's own apparent admission in song lyrics, Malcolm died simply for being in the wrong place. He was shot in the head, and his family received no justice when his alleged killer was acquitted. Gakirah Barnes was 17 years old. Whatever her alleged involvement in gang activity, she was a teenager shot 9 times and left to crawl to a porch before dying. The person police documents identify as her killer never faced charges. Her family never got closure. FBG Duck, Carlton Weekly, was 26, a rapper shopping for his son's birthday when he was shot 16 times in a coordinated assassination in one of Chicago's most affluent neighborhoods. While 6 men are now serving life sentences for his murder, federal documents suggest the person who ordered the hit and offered $100,000 for it never faced trial because he was already dead. Xavier Lulpab Robinson was 24 when he was killed in what federal prosecutors allege was retaliation for Bennett's death. Another victim of an endless cycle of violence. There were others. The 2 men wounded in the Malcolm Stuckey shooting, Alexander Witherspoon, who was shot and robbed in Atlanta, Can't Get Right, and the innocent bystander killed alongside him, Wooski, who was shot in the head at a funeral, and countless others affected by O Block's ongoing gang war. The victims of gang violence in Chicago are overwhelmingly young, black, and from impoverished neighborhoods. They're killing each other over territory that spans just a few blocks, over perceived slights, over social media posts, over songs. The zip codes where they're born essentially predict whether they'll survive to 30. These are communities that have been failed by decades of discriminatory housing policies, economic disinvestment, underfunded schools, and a criminal justice system that can't or won't protect them. The violence isn't random. It's the predictable result of systemic failures that concentrate poverty, limit opportunities, and leave young people with few paths forward. Part 18. The Civil Lawsuit and Industry Accountability. On October 9, 2024, FBG Duck's mother, Lashina Weekly, along with survivors Cache Williams and Dayvon Bennett, filed a wrongful death lawsuit. The defendants named include the 6 convicted men, the estate of Dayvon Bennett, Derek Lil Durk Banks, Only the Family Records, OTF, several major record labels, Alamo Records, Sony Music Entertainment, Interscope Records, Universal Music Group, Empire Distribution, the City of Chicago, Dolce & Gabbana, private security firms. The lawsuit alleges that Bennett and Banks profited off of Weekly's death through negligence and misconduct, and that record labels knew about Bennett's vendetta against FBG Duck and consistently sought to build a brand of violence and reality rap based on committing real acts of violence. This lawsuit raises important questions about music industry responsibility. Major labels signed, promoted, and profited from an artist whose lyrics appeared to describe and celebrate real murders. They distributed music videos that reenacted killings. They platformed someone that police documents and FBI files connected to multiple homicides. The suit argues these labels knew what they were promoting. They marketed Bennett's authenticity, his real street credibility, his actual criminal background. That authenticity was the selling point. But if the crimes were real and the labels knew they were real, what is their ethical and legal responsibility? The entertainment industry has long grappled with this question. How much are labels, streaming platforms, and media outlets responsible for the real-world consequences of the art they profit from? Where is the line between artistic expression and incitement to violence? Can you market reality rap when the reality includes actual murder? Bennett's career represents perhaps the most extreme example of this dilemma. This wasn't a case of an artist using violent imagery metaphorically or describing a past they'd left behind. According to extensive documentation, Bennett was allegedly actively committing or ordering murders while simultaneously rapping about them and profiting from those raps. His music wasn't art imitating life, it was life being broadcast in real time, with major labels collecting the revenue. The lawsuit seeks to hold these entities accountable for their role in allegedly enabling Bennett's violence by providing him with a platform, financial resources, and celebrity status that may have emboldened him and protected him from consequences. Part 19. System Failures. How did this happen? Bennett's story reveals multiple catastrophic failures in systems meant to protect public safety, witness protection, and intimidation. In both the Malcolm Stuckey and Gakirah Barnes cases, prosecutors had evidence, but witnesses were too intimidated to testify or gave inconsistent statements. The criminal justice system cannot function when witnesses, often themselves gang-affiliated or living in gang territory, reasonably fear for their lives if they cooperate with police. Chicago has struggled to implement effective witness protection programs. The city's gang territories are small and overlapping. Moving a witness to another neighborhood doesn't help if gang members can easily find them. Federal witness protection is typically reserved for high-level organized crime cases, not street gang murders. Social media evidence. Underutilized Bennett openly posted content that appeared to reference or confess to crimes. His Twitter activity in 2012 through 2014 was a near real-time documentation of alleged murders. Yet these posts weren't effectively used in investigations until after his death. Law enforcement has struggled to keep pace with how gang members use social media. By the time police identify incriminating posts, they're often deleted. Even when preserved, establishing that a tweet at a certain time proves involvement in a crime is legally difficult. LMAO posted minutes before a shooting is suspicious but not proof of murder. Gun trafficking, the weapon used in Malcolm Stuckey's murder, came through an illegal gun trafficking operation that supplied 25+ firearms to Chicago gang members. Mississippi's lax gun laws and interstate trafficking mean that even with strict gun laws in Chicago, weapons flow freely into the city. The trafficker Jonathan Smalley faced only 5 years in prison, despite knowing his guns were going to gang members and being used in murders. The system punishes the shooters when it catches them, but does little to stop the pipeline supplying weapons. Delayed federal intervention. The FBG Duck case was only prosecuted federally under RICO statutes after Duck's death. Had federal authorities intervened earlier in Bennett's pattern of alleged criminal activity, lives might have been saved. Federal RICO cases are powerful tools against organized criminal enterprises, but they're typically reactive rather than proactive. Music industry accountability record labels profited from music that appeared to describe or celebrate real murders. Bennett's lyrics contain specific references that law enforcement and legal experts interpreted as confessions, yet he continued to be signed, promoted, and platformed by major labels. The industry's position is typically that they're promoting art, not endorsing the content of the art. They point to First Amendment protections and argue they can't be expected to police whether lyrics are true. But when an artist is connected to multiple murders in police documents, when lyrics match unsolved homicides, when music videos reenact killings, at what point does promoting that artist become complicity? Systemic poverty and inequality. Perhaps the deepest failure is societal. Parkway Gardens was built with good intentions in the 1950s. It was meant to provide quality housing during an era of discrimination. But decades of disinvestment, white flight, economic collapse, the crack epidemic, mass incarceration, and policy failures turned it into one of Chicago's most dangerous areas. Young people growing up in areas like O Block face obstacles most Americans can't imagine. Underfunded schools, few job opportunities, exposure to constant violence, normalized gang membership as the only path to respect or resources. When legal paths forward are blocked or non-existent, illegal paths become attractive or necessary. Bennett grew up watching his father cycle in and out of jail before being murdered. He attended a high school where bringing guns to class was reportedly common. He lived on a block that experienced the most shootings in Chicago. In that environment, joining a gang wasn't a moral failure. It was survival, identity, community, and the only power structure that seemed to function. This doesn't excuse the violence Bennett allegedly committed, but it provides context for how a 12-year-old kid becomes, according to police documents and FBI files, someone connected to approximately 11 murders by age 26. Part 20. The Legacy. What does King Von's story mean? Dayvon Bennett died at 26, shot outside an Atlanta hookah lounge after initiating a fight. The person who shot him walked free under self-defense laws, the only individual connected to Bennett's violence to successfully claim they were protecting someone else. Bennett's musical legacy is undeniable. Songs like Crazy Story and Took Her to the O are certified platinum. His debut album reached number 5 on the Billboard 200. He pioneered a style of drill music that was unflinchingly honest about street violence. His storytelling ability was genuine talent, but that talent was built on a foundation that police documents, FBI files, court testimony, and his own lyrics suggest included multiple murders. His authenticity, the quality that made his music so compelling, allegedly came from actually living the violence he rapped about. 6 men are now serving mandatory life sentences without parole for FBG Duck's murder. Federal documents suggest Bennett ordered the hit, but never faced charges because he was already dead. Lil Durk, who helped launch Bennett's career, now faces life in prison for allegedly ordering a retaliatory killing after Bennett's death. Michael Wade is serving 28 years for his role in Malcolm Stuckey's murder, while Bennett was acquitted. The cycle continues. Young men in Chicago are still killing each other over blocks, over disrespect, over social media posts. The conditions that created Bennett, poverty, lack of opportunity, systemic racism, easy access to guns, normalized violence, haven't changed. Bennett's story is not a cautionary tale about the streets claiming another young artist. The evidence suggests he wasn't an artist who happened to come from the streets. He was allegedly a serial killer who happened to be able to rap. According to extensive documentation from law enforcement, he allegedly killed before he was famous, continued allegedly ordering killings after achieving success, and used his wealth and platform to allegedly finance and celebrate violence. The Malcolm Stuckey family never got justice. The Gakirah Barnes family never got justice. The FBG Duck family is suing for civil damages because criminal prosecution of the alleged mastermind was impossible. He was killed before he could be charged. The system failed repeatedly. Every failure cost lives. And when Bennett finally faced someone defending another person from his attack, that act was ruled justified. The only win for justice in his entire violent story. There is no redemption arc here, no change of heart, no lessons learned. Bennett used every chance he received: early release from boot camp, acquittal from murder charges, success in music, to allegedly continue or orchestrate violence. When he had wealth, fame, and options, federal documents suggest he used his money to place a six-figure bounty on a rival's head. The only certainties are the body count and the grieving families. Everything else is police documents, FBI files, witness statements, court testimony, and convicted co-conspirators serving life sentences. The evidence has been presented. The conclusions are yours to draw. Epilogue: a final note on true crime storytelling. This examination of Dayvon Bennett's case serves to educate about the real human cost of violence and the failures of systems meant to protect people. True crime content should never glorify violence or celebrate killers. Instead, it should illuminate how these tragedies occur and what can be done to prevent future ones. The families of victims deserve to have their loved ones remembered as people, not statistics. Malcolm Stuckey was a student with dreams. Carlton Weekly was a father shopping for his son's birthday. Gakirah Barnes was a teenager, however troubled. Their lives had value that was stolen from them. For listeners and viewers of true crime content, it's important to remember that these are real people, real families, real grief. This isn't entertainment. It's documentation of tragedy and system failure that should inspire thought about how we as a society can do better. If you found this information valuable and want to support this channel's mission of educating about true crime while respecting victims, please like and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bennett's story illustrates how violence perpetuates itself across generations, creating cycles that can span decades and devastate entire communities. His father was killed when he was 10. That trauma likely contributed to his own path into violence. He allegedly killed others, creating trauma for their families that may lead to more violence. His death led to alleged retaliation that killed Saviaya Robinson, creating more trauma, more grief, more desire for revenge. Each act of violence ripples outward, affecting not just the direct victims, but entire families and neighborhoods. Breaking these cycles requires acknowledging their complexity, Bennett made choices. He chose violence repeatedly, even after having opportunities to change course. He's responsible for those choices. Individual accountability matters, and nothing in this examination should be taken to excuse or minimize the harm caused by his actions. But his choices didn't occur in a vacuum. They occurred in a context of poverty, segregation, trauma, and limited opportunity that shaped what options seemed available. Understanding context doesn't mean removing responsibility. It means recognizing that preventing future tragedies requires addressing both individual choices and systemic conditions. The families of victims, the Stuckeys, the Barneses, the Weekleys, the Robinsons, deserve justice and closure. Many receive neither. The system failed them repeatedly. Better witness protection, more effective prosecution, and earlier intervention might have prevented some of these tragedies. The music industry needs to grapple with its role in promoting and profiting from content that documents real violence. The First Amendment protects artistic expression, but that protection doesn't eliminate moral responsibility for amplifying content that may fuel further harm. Record labels, streaming platforms, and media outlets all play a role in deciding what content receives promotion, investment, and mainstream visibility. Social media platforms need better mechanisms for identifying and addressing gang-related content that threatens or celebrates real violence while respecting free speech and privacy concerns. But ultimately, preventing future Dayvon Bennett's requires addressing root causes. No amount of policing or prosecution will solve violence rooted in poverty, lack of opportunity, and generational trauma. Real solutions require comprehensive community investment, quality education, available jobs, affordable housing, mental health services, and pathways to success that don't involve crime. If we're serious about preventing similar tragedies, we need to invest in communities before crises occur, not just respond after violence erupts. We need to treat trauma in children before it manifests as violence in adolescence. We need to create economic opportunities that make legitimate paths more attractive than illegal ones. Dayvon Bennett's story is a tragedy for him, for his victims, for their families, and for communities devastated by cycles of violence. May we learn from this tragedy and work toward preventing the next one. Thank you for watching this comprehensive examination of the Dayvon Bennett case. If you found this information valuable, please like and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and each other.